Okay, so good morning guys. I am Chester Darlingham and I'll present about the economy of Venezuela. So first, about the GDP per capita of Venezuela is, as of March 2017, is 15,602 compared to the GDP of Philippines, which is 8,223 US dollars. So this, the numbers I am going to present about Venezuela is not based on the government's reports, but rather independent reports or other sources that I'll state later, because due to their circumstances right now, the government or the central bank is not releasing the data that they have to release, such as the GDP per capita and other stuff like the debt that they have to pay off and the rest. So the population of Venezuela compared to our country is much less, with 31.8 million, and Philippines has 103.3 million people. And the income level, they are under upper middle income, while our country is under the lower middle income. And their HDI ranking is 0.76, which is rank 71, and the Philippines is 0.67, which is rank 115 globally. So the revenue, or most of the economy of Venezuela, is dependent on petroleum, which contributes for more than 50% of their GDP and is 95%. The petroleum exports is 95% of their total exports, and they are the sixth largest member in OPEC and oil production. So I'll talk about the brief history on Venezuela. So first, I will start with Hugo Chavez. He was elected back in December 1998, and he started his term in 1999. So he was a socialist president. So socialist approach, he used socialist approach in his economic policy. So he focused heavily on anti-poverty programs, health education. He nationalized thousands of companies in Venezuela, and they made those companies focus on oil production, since that's what the country is best. That's what the country is best in doing. So he borrowed a lot of money internationally in IMF and the other countries in order to do that. So in 2013, that's where the crisis in Venezuela started, because Hugo Chavez, he died, and he was replaced. His successor was Nicolas Maduro. And in 2013, there was a shortage and recession in Venezuela, since with the oil funds that Hugo Chavez made in the first few years of his term, he was able to. They were able to get a lot high revenue from the oil production, but in the latter part, during when the oil prices plummeted, since Venezuela is much dependent on oil, since 95% of their total export is from oil, and their GDP, 50% of their GDP is based on it, they had shortage and recession in order to maintain the economy. And Hugo Chavez also overspent. He focused primarily, as I've said, in different programs, in anti-poverty programs and other programs that he had, and he did not leave any savings for the country. So the government spent a lot of money, and when the oil prices went down, they had nothing to spend on. And in 2013 also, there were price controls and different government policies that eventually they almost freeze their currency, resulting to steep price rise in the common goods in the country. And in 2015, so there were low oil prices, and in 2015, since they had no savings, they had no money, the government decided to print more money. So that's why, since Maduro is also a left president, his leftist. So he decided to they have to start by printing money, so people have money to spend on the goods that they have to buy. But in 2015, it resulted to inflation. So based on different studies, the inflation in 2015 was 100%, and by the end of 2016, it reached 475%. So it's a hyperinflation. While the GDP of Venezuela, this is according to IMF data presented by Bloomberg. So from positive GDP growth until 2013, because of the plummeting of oil prices, the steep decline, it reached to negative 10 decline in their GDP. And the population poverty rate increased from around 30% to 76% up to 80%. Also, it has been reported by the National Survey of Living Condition that nearly 3/4 of the respondents reported they lost an average of 19 pounds between 2015 and 2016 only because of the shortage that occurred in the country. Also, according to the Bengoa Foundation for Food and Nutrition, the malnourishment of children reached to 25%. So almost 1 out of 4 children is malnourished. And also due to what's happening, the economic collapse happening in Venezuela, most families report that 32% of families, they eat 2 meals or less a day. That's the current living situation in Venezuela. And continuously, the infant mortality increases, and the capital city of Venezuela, which is Caracas, has the world's highest murder rate as of the moment. So crime continuously is increasing because of the shortage and the recession that's happening in the country. So what went wrong in the leadership of Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro? So first is mismanagement. Hugo Chavez was able to get a lot of funds of support of money borrowed from other countries, but he mismanaged it by putting it all on companies or in projects that are based on the oil production. So, and he didn't leave any savings. He just continuously spent money to support his programs on anti-poverty and such. So we can compare this to what the Marcoses did in our country, in the case that we were able to borrow a lot of money, but in our case, we were able to create infrastructures. Unlike in Venezuela, they weren't able to do that, but because the president focused on providing anti-poverty programs and focusing on oil production, since that's what they do best. And also their dependence. So the Venezuelan government was highly dependent on oil production. They didn't think that the oil production or like the oil prices will go low in the future, but they highly encouraged that they produce more and more oil, and to focus on that production since Venezuela is one of the countries with the highest oil reserves. So that's all.